How did it go?
It went very well.
Very well. Again.
Yep.
So some thumbs up. Anybody else? Thumbs up? Okay. Okay. Well, good for you. What did not go well? What would you like to ask some questions about, to explore, to refine your skills?
Just a tendency I noticed. I was supposed to be focusing on him and asking him questions and probing, but I kept wanting to contribute, like a conversation. My experience is, and I had to quiet that.
Okay. Did anybody else do that? Did I feel that? Yeah, it's one of the real challenges, and the more you can catch yourself wanting to fix or suggest or try this, the more you really coach through questioning, the more effective, the more powerful you'll be as that facilitator.
I had an issue with Christine, and
you have an issue with Christine.
No, not that kind of issue. And I've noticed this at other times, that she starts talking and she's giving me so much meat, but she's so rapid fire about her talking that pretty soon I'm chasing another rabbit hole. And finally I had to say, stop. It was all such good stuff, but I said, let's go back and do this.
And I'm playing both roles, too. That's how it's set up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so at what point is it effective for you to stop getting good meat, and at what point to start working?
Well, always get good meat. So basic principle, always get good meat. Never stop that. What I would recommend, this is where you may even have to ask the person, is it okay if I interrupt you as we do this process? And then anytime, what I would recommend is when you hear her words, just say, let me get this straight, and just repeat her words back to her. Because when you repeat someone's words back to them, because it came out of their matrix of meaning, and you don't paraphrase them. Paraphrasing means I'm taking your words and I'm going to give it back to you with my twist on it. But when I give you your words back, it's a feedback loop, and the person feels heard, feels understood, feels validated. So it'll slow the conversation down too.
So I should have interrupted. See, I didn't want to break rapport, and I also wanted to be very supportive.
Yeah.
But it would have been more effective for me to just pop
Can everybody
right
hear?
to just pop right in and just repeat her words back to her. And then that would give me a leverage point to take control again a little bit, and then get some more.
When you interrupt somebody and then tell them, well, try this, have you done that, and you impose other things, it feels like an interruption. But when I interrupt you and say to you, let me get this right, you're saying this, and you go, it resonates, so they're not going to lose their place because it's resonating. So in that you may need to just say to each other, is it okay if I interrupt you? Because it really helps with slowing it down, because the person can get so much into it, and then it's like, where do you go? Where do you take the next step? Okay. Other comments, questions, experiences that you had?
Yeah, it seemed like giving feedback and trying to understand where the other person is coming from and what they want and what they need. I got stuck to the point where what resources do you need to get beyond that? And it seems like the answer would always come back almost the same. I need to reframe or change the meaning, and I don't know how.
Okay. Okay. So that's a great example that once I'm inside of a frame, the old comment, when you're inside the frame, you can't see the frame. And the kind of thinking that created it, can't solve it. And I need to step out of it to see it. So in one sense, it's a great awareness that because you can then invite the person to step outside of the frame. And we're going to introduce some of those things this afternoon, and they're very, very powerful. But also it's powerful to get a person there. I don't know. And because then you can confirm the kind of thinking that has created this problem can't solve it, can it? Are you willing, and so this may be one of those questions, would you be willing, this may be weird and strange, to step aside from that to a different kind of thinking than what created that? Let's do some as if. If you didn't have that problem, how would you be thinking? And so we'll do a lot of as if, and possibility thinking. And in one sense, possibility thinking and as-if thinking is really the thinking of a child. Because children haven't been put in the boxes yet. So they got all these crazy ideas. But they're also very inventive. And their learning is so accelerated. Partly because they're not using the kind of thinking that constructed the problem. Now, I've met a number of adults who don't like as-if thinking or possibility thinking. And so at that point, when I'm inviting them, would you be willing to step aside and just do some as-if thinking, some pretend thinking? Because pretend, they may have a semantic reaction. Pretend, I'm beyond that. So that's when you say, yes, you can be stuffy later on. Let's see if we can solve this now. Because that really is the thinking of creativity and newness.
Well, I took my Explorer. She had a limiting belief that she was a slow learner, and she felt that way when she went through NLP training, and she was dwelling on the present. And I said, let's find out when this happened. And within a short period of time, we got her back to where she was 6 years old, and they had an experience in the classroom, which was traumatic. It becomes a limiting belief. It's a feeling that stops you. So I got her there, and then where do we go with it? So I says, why don't you step out and be the very teacher that gave you that bad feeling? What was the positive intent of that teacher? To really learn. And then I said, I want you to feel like the little girl now, where the teacher's coming at you positively instead of negatively. And we re-imprinted it. We mapped it all the way across to the present, to each and every one of those feelings. And then when we got forward, it was very easy to give it an identity word. But she had the power to learn. Good. We had re-imprinted the pattern.
So the frame you went to in her matrix was a memory frame,
yes,
a history frame, that had set something that prevented moving on.
Yeah, when she was in a stuck state like that, I had to go back and dig it out. That's a master's practitioner, if you study that.
And what I'd like to do is to reframe that so that instead of digging out the past, because the past, and this is, I think, the genius of Richard Bandler, the past doesn't exist, except now, in this moment, with some frame that's now existing. And so instead of thinking of it as digging out the past, if we think of it as identifying the present frame that was once created, that now is still operating, it's the frame that's the problem. So one of the things that we wrote in frame games is the person is never the problem. The frame is always the problem. That's why I don't have to get into a fight with a person or even my person. It's always the frame that's the problem. And I'm more than my frames. And so finding that frame, and this is what brings any kind of therapy, any kind of coaching to the moment. The past is never the problem. Even an event is never the problem. It's how I interpret that event, that past experience or whatever. So what do I think of it now? What does it mean to me in terms of me, my resources, my future? And this is what can make the transformation so quick. So the remapping and stepping out into second position, third position. So there's many ways of stepping outside, and
so that's a meaning frame.
Yeah.
Other experiences you had? Any questions to troubleshoot anything?
If I don't want to go back, and I'd rather do the frame, some of the issues that came up when I was doing stuff was time and money.
Okay.
How this person's seeing money or how they're seeing time. Maybe not respecting their own time or money or their own way of being in the world.
Okay.
How can I go from looking at their frame, if that's sort of what you're saying, instead of going back, like what happened in your past that might cause you to go in this direction now? How would you look at the frame to bring that out?
Okay. Well, what we're asking is, what is the frame? What is the meaning frame? And what's your intention? So here's another thing we're going to do that's not typical NLP. We're going to ask the why question. Why is this important to you? Why is this significant? What's your intention? We're going to ask the why question, the why of intention, the why of outcome. What do you want and why are you trying to do this? Not the why of history, not why are you this way, but that why. As we look at the frame, sometimes a person doesn't know, so then we can ask the history question. We can say, what event set this off so that you mapped it that way? How old were you then? And you mapped it this way, and what else did you map? And how has this worked out for you? So that we immediately go to, that just locates it, that grounds it, but we don't go back in the sense of doing historical digging out. We're really looking at what's the frame now? How does that frame affect your sense of self, your resources, other people, your future, your present?
Between doing something for yourself and doing stuff for other people, you want a win-win situation. But it seems like, if you do something for yourself, the other people might not be getting it, and then you'll feel bad about that. Is there something in what we did, like a frame or something that I can look at there? We're
going to come to that. On day 4, our whole day is on relationships. And the frames that support us really to creating win-win relationships and so forth, and doing that responsibility 4 and 2, making that distinction that I'm responsible for what I think and what I feel, which is a full-time job, and what I say and do. I'm not responsible for what you think, what you feel, what you say, I'm not responsible for that. Now, if I'm in a relationship with you, I'm responsible to you for what I think and feel and say and do. And so we'll get to that on day 4 as we cut that line between responsibility 4 and responsibility 2. It makes that distinction between accountability and relationship. And if you don't make that distinction, then you'll go around feeling responsible for everybody, and then that also will drive you to fix them. So one way to get your greedy little hands off their brains and necks is to really give them permission to think what they want to think, because they're going to anyway, and feel what they're going to feel, because they're going to anyway, and do and say whatever they're going to do. Because it really helps us to feel free from needing to control them. And then I can be more free to take control of myself. And then the way I'll change them is to change my response. Because the most powerful way for me to change someone else is to not let their game work anymore. We'll get to that.
Her original question prompted thought. And I kind of, that question of how can we take his situation you did, was that your daughter you were talking about? Or
No.
Well, whoever it was. Could you do that? Try to run that, try to help that person without going back to that event. How would you do that?
That's where we ask, what is the frame of mind you have right now about that? I know it was created when you were 8.
No, what I'm saying is
15.
Somebody, and their thought is, what was their thought was about learning? They had a problem about learning.
Yeah, I'm slow at learning. I'm not a good learner.
I'm slow at learning. How could you deal with that problem of slow learning without going back and attaching it at all to the event, the traumatic event that took place? Can you work that out without going back to that event?
Well, the first question would be, you believed that at a certain time, right? Do you still believe it today? And you got evidence for this. Because that's the way a belief is. A belief is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Do you like that belief? Do you want that belief?
Yeah, so you work it out that way without needing to necessarily go back to the event, because they might not even remember the event.
Exactly. Plus, the thing about any belief is that as a self-fulfilling prophecy, the longer you lived with it, you got more evidence. You got more evidence. You got more evidence. In fact, it'll filter out all the things contrary, all the exceptions. If I know that about beliefs, then I won't believe my beliefs too much. Now, we have to believe. We are believers in something. We say, and to create a belief, all you have to do is to meditate yourself with any thought. That's right, that's the way it is, yes. You confirm a thought and you turn it into belief. So we have to believe. But we don't have to believe in our beliefs. People who believe in their beliefs are fanatics. Now, I strongly believe in a lot of things. But I'm not going to believe in my beliefs because I know it's just a map. At best, it's just a way of mapping something, and it may be very effective, but I'm not going to believe in my beliefs. I'm going to just believe with the possibility, because when I believe in my beliefs, then I'm going to confirm that my beliefs are real and right and permanent, and you better straighten out. So leaving the possibility that this fallible brain may not get it all right, which is always a good thing, I think. It's a fallible brain. It's doing the best it can. And I might be very strong in that belief, but I'm not going to believe in my belief. That lets me be open to exceptions, to when it doesn't work, to when it could be falsified, to finer adjustments that I might want to make with that belief. So this is those levels, and so it's like as we go higher, we can confirm things and shut ourselves into that matrix, and believing in beliefs tends to have that effect.
Actually, I have a belief about something, but if you take it to every possibility, you really can't see beyond it, and so it might not work in a certain situation. You want to have that balance of the extremes, like, okay, in this situation it's wonderful, 80%, 90%, but over here, don't even go there, and it's not going to help.
Okay.
I was going to say that most people don't even really ever question. The question doesn't come up. Do you believe that? Even though their belief is really screwy, they know it's not helping them. Do you believe it? They would probably say, no.
And this is where we can get some leverage and loosen up the matrix. Do you believe that? Well, intellectually I don't, but I may feel it. Intellectually, do you believe that criticism is the worst thing in the world and hurts your feelings and is terrible and you should avoid it at all costs? Well, most of us intellectually, well, no, people are going to criticize. But at the feeling level, when we get criticized, so there's some belief operating, even though intellectually, so it was probably a belief that was set when we were 7. And as we've had other things, the belief is still there, but intellectually, at another level, we know better, but we're not feeling that new belief that it's just criticism. So what we want to do is to step out, and sometimes just awareness. My 7-year-old brain invented that, and it made sense at the time. Because at the time, I didn't have any coping skills, and when the kids on the playground wouldn't play with me, I thought it was terrible. And sometimes just that awareness, oh, that's what was going on. And then the matrix just starts shaking and shimmering and moving around. What is the matrix? I love what Trinity said to Neo in the movie. He was in the nightclub because he had followed the white rabbit to see where the white rabbit would go. And Trinity said to Neo, and it was real seductive as she whispered in his ear, "It is the question that drives us, Neo. It's the question that brought you here. You know the answer just as I did. The answer is out there, Neo." And Neo said, "What is the matrix?" This is on page 7 in your manuals. What is the matrix? Well, the matrix is a set of frames that have and do create our reality, our sense of reality, and our feelings, and our responses to the world. And so as we look at the matrix, as we step aside to look at how have I mapped things, and what mappings have I created, and do they serve me well? Do they sabotage me? Do they bring out the best in me? Then we start to look at how do we create this matrix? When we were born really without any instincts. So we are a class of life who don't know how to be human. And this really is shown by the federal children who are a little child, 18 months, 2 years old, gets lost in the wilderness, and maybe some dogs or wolves raise the child. And if a child misses certain imprint periods, and especially the hearing of language and the speaking of language, a child, as a feral child, will grow up and really not know how to be human. The ones that have been recovered as late as 7, 8 years old and have spent many years being raised by animals, and they miss that human imprint period, almost all of them die at 15 or 16 years old. Hardly any of them live into past their teens. And those are the children who never use language, never have a sense of self as we think of it, never can use utensils, They just eat the way they were taught. And so Abraham Maslow said, we don't have instincts. We don't know how to be human like animals do. They have all the programming. They just do it, which is amazing when you think about the DNA information that allows an animal to know how to migrate or to build a beaver to build a dam or to do some of the things they do. But we don't know how. We have to learn. So Abraham Maslow said we have instinctoids, tendencies. We have the tendency to pick up any language that we hear. We have the tendency to keep growing and developing, especially if there's safety, if there's love, if there's bonding, if we're not interfered with. So we don't know how to be human. So that's why we need to be born inside of a matrix, so that someone informs us, here's how, in this culture, to eat, or to greet, or to bond, or to learn, or to take on a trade. And so we learn how to be. One of the first things we learn, and this comes from developmental psychology, and these are the 5 content matrices, one of the first things we learn is how to have a sense of self. So one of the first matrices that each of us builds is self. And this starts to occur as parents gives us a name, and then starts giving us attributes, and we start taking on a sense of self. In fact, we say that I learn who I am as I see myself reflected in your eyes. So if your eyes are kind and loving and compassionate and making me safe, then I start mapping out, I'm good, I'm okay. Or maybe even I'm valuable. Maybe even I'm precious. I'm lovable. I'm going to amount to something. I count. Now, if the messages sent back by others weren't those messages, then we might have to rebuild our self-matrix, do our own reparenting, so that we can say, and you might try on these words, I'm precious. I count. I'm important. I deserve as much as anybody deserves. And I get to do stuff. So the very first thing we start to build is self, and that's that individuation as we individualize as little children. Apparently a little baby doesn't even know that it's not part of mother anymore. And sometimes you see a little infant and maybe it'll bite your finger and have a sense of pain. And eventually it learns, my finger. If you bite my finger, it hurts. We individualize. We become an autonomous human being. And we develop a sense of self. Not too much longer, and the child starts having mobility and moving. And of course, that starts the matrix of power. What can I do? Where can I go? And we see a child walking, and then crawling and walking, and then start moving, and that locomotion. And of course, they're wanting to try everything and do everything, testing its powers. It seems to me that that's part of our nature, our instinct. We have an instinctoid to find out what we can do. So if this is self-esteem, that is your sense of value and importance as a human being, this is your sense of human doing. What can I do? What can I do? What are my skills? What are my talents? So this is self-confidence. Self-confidence is very, very different from self-esteem. We're all born with no self-confidence. We're totally incompetent. We can't even roll over or wipe our rear ends. I mean, talk about incompetent. You were born incompetent. And if you live long enough, you'll go out about the same way you came in. I hate that. It's a cosmic joke. But self-esteem, most of us will pick up a little baby and we will value it, even though it's incompetent, can't talk, can't speak, can't do anything. Most of us will value it as precious and valuable. We will esteem it, not based on what it can do, but what it is, a human being. Self-esteem is valuing self as valuable unconditionally. Self-confidence, a whole different subject, is what can I do? Do I have confidence to pull this skill off or not? And there's things I'm confident and competent in, and the more I read and study, I find out all the things I'm incompetent about. All the things I can't do, but I still like me. So self-esteem, human being, human doing. And when it comes to this matrix of power, it's all of our resources. What resources do I have? What can I do? And what resources inside? Mental resources, emotional resources, verbal resources, linguistic powers, behavioral powers. What can I do? And it's an important part of our lives because most of us feel the need to be able to do something that's significant, that contributes, that makes life worthwhile. And trying to do things that you're not competent about is just a formula for how to feel bored, how to feel inadequate, how to just spin your wheels. So finding what do I have natural dispositions and attitudes and talents for is part of the power matrix or the resource matrix. And then later we discover that there's resources outside. Books are resources, tapes are resources, people are resources, friends are resources. So there's resources not only inside but outside, and the more I feel resourceful, if this or that happened, there's ways to cope with that, there's ways to master that. There's resources of how I think about it, how I feel about it, what I can say and do, that allows me to be resourceful. So we have human beingness, human doingness, self-confidence. Then we have others. This is the matrix of the audience you have in your mind. Because as the baby starts to have that constancy of representation, before then, the baby can have a hellish experience if mom goes out for the night. If mom and dad goes to a restaurant for the evening and they're left with a babysitter or a nanny, that baby can be in dire hell, screaming and hollering, because out of sight is out of mind. So the babysitter will be showing pictures of mommy and daddy, maybe even getting them on the phone at the restaurant. But it's not too long, and the baby can represent mommy and daddy. And when we start to do that, we start carrying an audience with us. Who's in your audience? Who do you play your life to? Because we all inside of our mind carry around people. I have my mother and my father in my mind, and I play my life a lot to my dad. I'm always, even though he died 10 years ago, I'm playing my life to my dad. And somewhere in my mind, I've got an ex-wife and some old girlfriends and some old friends and some people I don't get along with so well anymore, and people I have known that's passed on. And then I've got all the other people. There's a whole audience up there. And when you know that you got this relationship or others matrix, then what do I believe about people? What do I value about people? What do I value about the social emotions, love and forgiveness and connection and embarrassment and the social emotions? And so you got a whole matrix around others. And depending upon how you represent them, one time at a trainer's training, I asked somebody, a trainer who had stage fright. I said, well, in your mind, when you look at an audience, what do you see? And he said, well, all these faces with frowns and the brows furrowed, and they're looking like that, and they've got these eyes, and they never never blink, they stare. I said, whoa, I wouldn't want to speak to those people either. And so we just made the eyes real big and had big eyelashes, blinking, smiling mouths, happy faces. Because how do you represent people? When you think about going into a group or a social event that you don't know anybody, how do you represent? So the others matrix. And how do you think about negotiating with people? How do you think about selling? How do you think about presenting yourself? All the things in the social or the others matrix of your mind. There may be some enemies there. There may be some fearful things there that you need to adjust that matrix. Then there's the matrix of time. Time is one of these other things that doesn't exist. What exists are events. And some events are happening now. Some events have happened before, similar events. Some events will happen again. And when we step back, we can measure those events. And so as a little child, I told you before not to do that. So we can represent not only people, but things I've done, things I'm doing, things I will do. So events, and we can compare them. And in your matrix of time, this is where NLP talks about your timeline and your past and your present, your future. And how much of your mental, emotional time do you live in the past? How much of your mental, emotional time do you live in the now? How much of your mental, emotional time do you live in the future? You know people who live in the past. 80% of their time, they're in the past.
Play golf with old people, you know.
And if you go to the other extreme, sometimes little kids or sometimes juvenile delinquents, they live so much in the now that it's like they never learned anything from the past. They're not anticipating any consequence of the future. Now, they're the impulsive buyers and they're the impulsive actors. And then there's some people who live in the future. You know, one of these days I'll start life. Life will begin to happen. If you were to have a circle and divide that circle into 3 parts, how much you spend in the past, how much you spend in the present, how much you spend in the future, the time zones, because we're time travelers. It's part of how our mind, body, emotion system works. How much time do you live in the past, in the present, in the future? How far out does your future go? How much time do you have? What do you believe about time? Is time your friend or your enemy? Do you have enough time or not have enough? So there's time emotions, temporal emotions, regret, anticipation, worry, hope, desire, memory, nostalgia. So there's in the time matrix of your mind. And so we start building up a sense of time, and if we live sequentially or if we live randomly in time, and so the time matrix. Then the world matrix is that catch category of, as a little child, as we had a sense of self and others and a sense of what we can do and a sense of time, we started wondering what else is out there in the world? What's beyond the front doors of the house? What's beyond this neighborhood? What's beyond this planet? So we start looking at the different worlds. And it's also conceptual worlds, the world of mathematics, the world of marketing, the world of business, the world that your dad lived in or your mom lived in, maybe the NLP world, the world of therapy, the world of coaching. And so different kind of worlds that we go navigate in. So we make maps about some of those worlds. So these are the 5 content matrices, and they pretty well follow developmental progress as we grow up. And because we build these maps so closely, and they're so integrated, it's like we never leave home without them. They're just always there, and they become like filters, like metaprogram filters, like perception, like the glasses we wear. We see the world through our sense of self, our sense of our competency, our sense of time, of others, and the maps that we have about various worlds. And so the matrix is made up of this content. And that's where content sometimes is important. We have to deal with the content. What specifically did you map? Because if you map something that's erroneous, and that map is not going to take you anywhere. That map is just, it's wrong. It's erroneous. Or it's toxic. Because if you mapped, I'm inadequate. If you mapped, everybody else is quicker, smarter, better. If you map things like that, and that becomes one of your filters, then that matrix itself, to some extent, is toxic matrix. Nothing wrong with you, but those frames, embedded within frames, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you've got so much proof that that's the way it is, that matrix itself is just not a healthy matrix. It could be even morbid. And so what we want to do is to step aside from such matrices, recognizing that they're just frames and maps, and then start choosing. If I didn't get the right information early, whether it's from parents or school or wherever it came from, now I can start to remap in a way that I can build a matrix that's robust, that's strong, that's vigorous, that's alive, that's meaningful, and that'll serve me and others well. So that's where we're going to go with that matrix. And we'll look at each of those sections. We'll look at each of those, because part of my design here is to help you to walk out 7 days from now to build up a really robust matrix of these contents and of your ability of creating meaning and the best intentions.
That's why meaning and intention is considered the process matrices, and the others are content.
Right.
Still not clear on that, but I'm not going to, you don't have to do that. If you
So as we make meaning about self, we make meaning about power, make others about self, time, and world, and these here, this matrix becomes our filters. It was we created it, we absorbed it from others, or we invented it ourselves, and we set this so that now this is the world we come from. This is the universe we live in. And it all makes sense, but it just may not be useful. And so when we explore our matrix, we're exploring those limiting beliefs, those ideas that have gotten into our neurology. Other comments, questions before we break for lunch here?
You just said that it might all make sense, but it might not be useful. And that seems like a
Contradiction?
No, a great sorting point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to take a look at things.
Right.
I have things go on that I'm figuring out compulsively. And are they useful? Is the whole thing.
Yeah.
Flabbergasted me to look at that.
Okay.
One thing that would really illustrate your last point there, I have a website where I sell different hypnotic type tapes, subliminal tapes for procrastination or whatever. And I started listening to them to see, what kind of effect they have. And it was really amazing. You listen to it, and all of a sudden one day you wake up, and you're like, wow, I changed the world. I didn't change, but the world changed. And really, it was me that changed.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing.
So change is as quick as changing a frame. Now sometimes one frame, it'll all change. And so what we're going to talk about, how do you find that leverage point, that one frame that the whole matrix will change? Sometimes you have to change several frames. You have to, because they may be really solid, really habituated. But we'll look at that so that we can make that change and make it easy so that it's not painful. So that's where we'll go this afternoon as we're still detecting the matrix.
Question, Michael.
Okay.
In the state when, self, power, and others, that can all change based upon your state, right? But in some states of mind that I have,
okay.
The world is cool. At other times, the world
okay.
is not so cool.
So one of our realizations is that sometimes this matrix around a certain thing that's limiting, the matrix when you're in this state can't get activated. And so sometimes the way to start changing a matrix is every time the person starts to go into that state that will activate that, you interrupt them. And say, oh, I'm sorry, what was that again? What was that hurtful, ugly thing that you were thinking about? And they start to, and then you interrupt them again. So that the matrix comes out of our states and comes back to and grounds it into the state, the mind-body state. And that's why sometimes with some body therapies, you can be having a massage, and all of a sudden it's like something starts emerging and coming, and you're remembering things or feeling things, and you wonder, where is this coming? Because it gets into muscle memory. It gets into actual neurology. And so it works both ways. As we create meaning and build the meaning puts us in a certain state, and it operates from that state. And then there are states that you can't activate it, so we can do state interrupts. And so that'll be one of the, I like that myself, interrupting person's states when they start to go into something. Just that mischievous part, I guess. But it really shows the power of those frames being grounded in some state. Well, we're going to take an hour and 15 minutes. I've got 10 after 1, so we'll come back at 2:25. We began this morning really identifying what the matrix is and then how to detect it. Has everybody seen the movie The Matrix? No? No? Who has not?
I tried to tell her.
I play off of, and we will play off of the movie The Matrix from time to time. It's really a science fiction thing about about AI, artificial intelligence, and how it took over and had a war against the humans and won, and how that as it won the war, it would take humans and put them in an egg-like thing, a matrix, and then inject all kinds of information so the people thought they were living in Sydney, Australia in 1999. And so they would just live out their lives because of all this information sent to the bodies, but actually they're in these egg structures. And so the matrix was this information sense that would deceive them and trick them. And Neo, and there's a lot of metaphorical stuff played off of it, the new person, Neo, he has this feeling inside of him, something is wrong with the world. And he's searching for it, and he has this idea, and he's heard in the background there's this matrix. But he doesn't know what it is, or where it is, or how it works, but he has this sense. And so the movie starts off with him at a computer screen, and the message comes, Neo, the matrix has you. So the next message is follow the little white rabbit. And so some people knock on his door, and he's a computer hacker, and he's doing some illegal things. And so the message is sent that you can escape this matrix. And so the setup is that he finally meets Morpheus, and the name Morpheus means transformation. He meets Morpheus, and Morpheus holds out the two pills, the red pill and the blue pill. Take the blue pill, and you can wake up in your bed tomorrow and believe anything you want to. Take the red pill, and I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. As we think about the frames of our mind, we're going to go into the rabbit holes, into the labyrinth of all the places our mind goes that creates our reality. And as we do, we wake up to the matrix. We wake up to the fact that I created this construct of meanings and beliefs and values and intentions, and it's my matrix. And unlike in the movie where Neo could actually get out of the matrix into the real world, we don't have that choice. We can escape one matrix into another, into another, into another. Because to think is to create a womb of meaning. And so the question then is, what world of meaning do you live in? What universe of reality do you live in, and how well does it serve you? And does the matrix have you? So in your manuals, at the very beginning of the manuals on page 6, the page that starts off with the matrix, when the matrix has you, how can you tell? Morpheus said to Neo, a feeling has brought you to me that something's wrong with the world. There's a splinter in your mind driving you mad. The splinter that sometimes gets in our minds that drive us mad are these splinters. And it's figuring out how you can know that the matrix has you instead of you having it when the matrix is not well formed, when it's ill formed. So on page 6, the right-hand column, here's some signs that maybe the matrix has you. You're unable to act on what you know. Do you know more than you do? Do you know lots and lots of things that would improve the quality of your life, and yet for all the intelligence and wisdom, you just can't pull it off? Maybe the matrix has you. Another sign, repeatedly experiencing the same problems. Are you deluged with lots of good advice for solving a difficulty, and yet for all the things that you try, that problem continues to reoccur? Maybe the matrix has you. A third one, you feel controlled by something you just can't put your finger on, you can't specify. You feel played by some known or unknown game that keeps putting you through the same pattern over and over. Does it seem that no matter what you do, the system seems to be plotting against you, that the matrix of frames has you? A fourth one is attempted solutions only makes the problem worse. I hate it when that happens. Does the way of thinking, feeling, acting keep repeating itself, and when you fight it, it gets stronger? Well, maybe the matrix has you. It's kind of the same problem we have when we try hard to sleep. You know, our attempted solution, I've got to go to sleep. Go to sleep. Quit worrying about that. Makes it worse. going round and round in circles. Do you feel that sometimes you go round and round in circles trying to find better solutions for developing better habits, maybe in eating or exercising, relating or succeeding, but it's just like you're going round and really getting nowhere? And the last one there is experiencing diminishing returns over time. Do you find that you have one or more patterns that the longer you use it, it becomes less and less useful? Once it might have been effective, but it's not only not effective, but it's getting worse. Well, those might be some signs that the matrix has you. You can see on the opposite side, healing a matrix so that you can make it robust, so that this may be some of the outcomes that you want from the training this week. Being able to act on what you know, closing that knowing-doing gap, bringing closure to some old frames. Maybe the fact is that we need to step out of the matrix and just bring some closure to those frames so that we just put an end to it, resolve it, and bring closure. Or maybe we need to power up to become the master of our matrix, giving us an inner sense of control, flexibly shift to do something different. Maybe the way we need to deal with our matrix is having the flexibility and the adaptability to quit trying what doesn't work and those attempted solutions that just make it worse. Stepping out of the negative spirals and those double binds and those contradictions. Or the last one there is creating more empowering frames and matrices so that we can load that up. That's going to be much service in a much healthier way. So when the matrix has us, how do we recognize that, and what do we do in order to undo that? Another set of words that I do want to mention before we go much further, because I'm going to be using these words a lot, is on page 9. How many have read the book Frame Games? Okay, so about half have read the book Frame Games. Frame Games is a user-friendly version of metastates, so that the game that I play is the verbal game and the behavioral game, even the emotional game, maybe even the mental game that I play in life, in relationship, in exercise, in wealth, in business. What game am I playing? How do I talk? How do I try to recruit people to play the game? And so the game is the states I'm in, the emotions I'm in, and the interactions that I engage in. What game do you play with food? I shouldn't be eating this, but it's really good. What game do you play with food? What game do you play with exercise? I know I should be exercising regularly. Do you ever play the blame game? Do you ever play the solution game? So what games do we play? A game is just a set of actions. Could be mental, emotional, could be verbal, behavioral, set of actions. But every game has a frame. Every game has the rules of the game. How do you play the game? What are you trying to win? Who do you play it with? When do you play it? How do you play it? How do you know to stop? When does the game end? Is it a win-win game? Is it a win-lose game? So the frames are all the rules of the game that tell you and inform you, how do you play this? How do you play the blame game? Well, you get your finger out, your index finger. I always say, lower the weapon. Well, you get the weapon out, and you point to someone. And you start with the word you, your, and then you add something like fought. If it wasn't for you. So there's rules to this game. Well, you have to be in a certain state. You have to get in the right state.
Saddam Hussein on TV played that game in front of the judge. He was pointing.
Yeah, I saw that.
President of Iraqi. Yeah, he said he was. I still am. That's what he said.
So there's ways to play games, and we can analyze our actions, our set of actions, by what game are you playing? Wherever there's a game, there's a frame overhead that informs it, governs it, directs it. If you didn't have that frame, you couldn't play that game. When you have a frame, you're going to play a game. It's inevitable. So frames and games go together, and that'll be part of our language that we'll be talking about here. It's really talking about the states that you're in and the metastates. It's going to talk about the matrix of frames and all the embedded frames that define the games that we play. Because talking about games and frames enables us maybe to explore the matrix. And that's what I want to do with this. I want to explore the matrix by asking, if you could name some games that you play in life, if you could name 5 games that you play in life that you have had enough of, I just don't like playing that game. It may be a game, when someone criticizes you, what games do you then play? What game do you play when you've had 3 disappointments in the same morning? What game do you play when a big business deal was coming up and then something happened and it just didn't work out? So, given some events, some trigger, what games do you play that it just doesn't serve you well? It doesn't enhance your life, doesn't empower you as a person, doesn't make your relationships go better, put you into spins. What game would you like to change and play a whole new game with? And so it could be in any area. If you, maybe on the backside of that sheet of paper, write down that just to start to think about something you'd like to play with, because it gives us entrance into the matrix. A lot of times as I go around, and I've been doing this for quite a number of years now, people say, well, do you not have any more problems? Well, yeah, I got problems. Just living life and meeting different people, it gives you opportunities to have problems. It gives you opportunity to also find out what are the default games I go back to, and what new games do I want to play when I get that opportunity again. And so as we think about some triggering situations that you would like to have more effective responses to and be in a better state, so that because oftentimes the responses we give are just purely functions of our state. If we were in a better state, so as we take charge of our matrix and elicit the kind of states that we want to have, what are 3, 4, 5 games that you tend to default to when certain circumstances occur that you've had enough of, that you'd like to change? Because we're going to start exploring it, and we'll use the frame game analysis to do so. What would you call the game? Well, let's name the game, because the name of the game is to name the game. Because if we can name it, oftentimes, oh, that's what I'm doing, the blame game, or the if it weren't for you game, or whatever. So let's name it. What are the frames that drive it? How does it work? When does it start? What are the rules? Who do I play it with? Who do I not play it with? So as you identify a few things, if you don't have anything like that, I guess we could create some for you. Make a list of the 5 most frustrating, persistent, negative behavioral patterns in your life. And that's what we're doing right now. In just a minute, we'll go to page 24.